And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report for Friday. It is the 16th of September, and we are well less than 60 days to the election of President Trump. He's ahead in the polls nationally. He's ahead in many of the battleground states. He's definitely moved and surged forward, staying on policy and not counterpunching all the comments I expect during the debates. If Hillary is functional enough to actually be in the debate, she'll try to just aggravate him and see if she can show to the public that he is basically doesn't have the character or the temperament to be presidential, which already he's showing he has. So being a tough businessman, he's used to the idea of counterpunching. That is going away with his new campaign team. And you can see that with his policies, he's actually been more substantive in policies than any other presidential candidate, probably in American history. So as I watched the Fox News this morning to look at some of the negatives if Hillary gets in, she'll appoint the Supreme Court justices. She will appoint all the heads of the different departments. She will literally be executive queen under executive orders, and she'll weaponize the government to the point where your civil rights will be down the toilet, including your right to bear arms, your right to travel without showing your papers, please, or biometric ID. It's going to be very nasty if she gets in, which I can only see now that she can get in by voter fraud. So, right now the media showed up at a presidential ballroom for the New Trump International Hotel on Friday morning, expecting Donald Trump to take questions about whether he still questions if President Obama was born in the United States. Instead, they got more than a half-hour variety of military heroes, General's Medal of Honor recipients and Gold Star wife, expressing support for the Republican nominee. So I guess he trolled, as they say, the media, which is that's pretty clever on the part of Trump. And they tweeted, "I am now going to brand the New Trump International Hotel in D.C. for a major statement." So that was interpreted by the press to mean he's going to address the quote birther issue. Birther issue is not an issue. The fact is we know the Photoshop thing, but of course they want to do this to make him branded to be a quote conspiracy theorist. We who have actually investigated it know that Obama is not an American. He was born in Kenya. He had a false birth certificate manufactured in Hawaii, where his mother brought him from Kenya. That he applied as a foreign student to Occidental University here in California, and the proof's in the pudding. So when they try to say that he was an American, this is an example of the globalists snubbing us by shoving in our face someone who's not an American, doesn't adhere to our laws, and is deconstructing the nation. So it's okay to me for Trump to, quote, deny the birther issue, just sidestep it and not answer it, because it's irrelevant. He's substantive in his issues. He's going to restore the Constitution to its rightful status by appointing Supreme Court justices that will actually do the right thing. He's going to rebuild the military. He's going to take care of our vets. I want our vets to be able to have access to the best possible care. If it's not available in the VA, then to go to any hospital at our expense. This idea that you have to go to a very awful hospital system, it's either backed up or staffed by incompetence, is an obscenity, and it's only going to end if Trump gets in there. So if you're in the military, he has massive support by all the branches of the military, and only a few outliers that are basically incompetent generals, most of them that would have been appointed by the establishment, either Republican or Democrat, to continue policies of nation building and other things that balkanize the Middle East and elsewhere. So that's that story. The other one, of course, is the Democrats are picking Bernie as a backup. Questions about Hillary's health are rising on the left. So they're more and more concerned. So the combination of that and the combination of not being out on the stumping on the campaign trail, the combination of that and her hiding her health issues, and her doctor, Dr. Bardak, is either incompetent or she's politicizing the fact that everybody who runs for president, especially these two candidates that are the oldest that have probably ever run, we need to know fully if they're up to the job. You want a commander-in-chief that if you call him at 2 a.m. and tell him that the transfer codes are been sent from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they're calling him to ask whether or not the launch codes can be activated. You need to know that those launch codes will determine if we're going to do a counterstrike to a suspected nuclear attack on America, or an EMP attack, or a major terrorist activity. So what I see happening is Trump is coming very forward. He's probably needs to lose about 40 pounds. Other than that, his cholesterol problem, which can be dealt with omega cod liver liquid better and head-to-head than using a statin drug. Other than that, I don't know of anything major that would slow down Trump from keeping up the pace and the energy level to be president, like his massive business with connections all over the world, and most of his senior and upper management are female because they're great middle management. Ladies are top-notch in that, regarding his daughter Ivanka as a perfect example. So now he's put out his child care policy, he's put out his economic policy now in New York. Now that he's actually put out policies on terrorism, the border, etc., each one of them, he's up to 88% support within the Republican Party. He probably needs to get to 93% to get the full force effect of the Republicans. My feeling is, as the campaign moves on, the inevitability of the horror of a Democratic presidency, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, who, to be honest with you, I cannot see Bernie being able to debate Donald Trump on any substantive issue in terms of how he's going to pay for it, how he's going to manage it, etc. You can't say, I'm going to offer free college without controlling the cost of college and restructuring the entire system of federal payments. I don't see how any issue, which we should make healthcare a national issue, but we need a parallel system because it's going to take years to transition. The first thing we want is portability and competition in healthcare. We want a value-added tax. We need to get rid of state licensure, malpractice, and fee-for-service codes and pay salaries with great salaries, great pensions, great time off, especially for elderly physicians who want to stay in partial practice and female doctors who want to have a family. And that's a process that will make a huge difference to the cost of health care. We also need to pay fee-for-service. We should also rationalize the amount of scanners and specialists in different cities or towns. We've got way overburden of too many specialists, and we have a way overburden of replication of scanners and technology, which is costing the general public tremendous amounts in fees. And the insurance carriers now have gone crazy trying to acquire money because they've invested in the derivatives markets. So American healthcare is on the ropes right now, and unless Trump moves in there, under a Democratic government, they will collapse the healthcare system, and they will collapse the economy, and they will collapse our rights and freedoms, and they put up a leftist Supreme Court in there that'll, completely destroy the fabric of America. So, so the situation is going to be considerably worse if the Democrats get in, which is becoming less and less likely. So the fact that the Dems are talking about picking Bernie Sanders as a backup is quite remarkable. To me, it's an example that they're finally getting the notion that maybe, they say which Democrat. In fact, they're even floating the idea, some people are writing articles, that Obama's wife, Michelle, or should I say Mike, Mike the Spike, will be the presidential step-in where he gets sicker or can't keep up with the pace, which I think is extremely unlikely. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about is, and we're trying to track down Matthew to get him on the program. We were having a really interesting discussion. I'm going to post up some articles about some of the genetic basis. One of the conferences I went to a number of years ago on the genetic and metabolic basis for violent behavior in the prison systems and legal system was Dr. Alex Schaus. And Dr. Schaus, this is back in the early 80s, had discovered that if you look at hair levels of manganese and you look at certain metabolites in their blood and urine, they're abnormal. And manganese, of course, is a mineral that, if it's at a very high level, can have some effects on the rage control nucleus in the reptilian brain called the amygdala. Now, if you have, in a sense, seizure-like activity in the amygdala, you're going to have an easy trigger for irrational behavior and violent behavior that's difficult to turn off. And now with our deep brain imaging studies like SPECT scans and PET scans and so on, we can actually see the abnormal neurological activity, we can look at urine levels for platelets for neurotransmitters. We can also identify the genetics, which is the multiple copies of the monoamine oxidase 2 enzyme. And if this gene SNP is present, there's a much higher chance that the person is going to have a violent behavior if they're put in a specific environment that challenges them, puts them under stress. That means these people should have metabolic support. Now, the state, as a side of this, they're now legalizing marijuana all over the country, and marijuana in a percentage of the population will trigger off schizophrenia or psychosis. Now, we can actually do a gene SNP, and as part of the national health system, I would have the gene SNPs on everybody so that if they take drug A and drug B, they may have a polymorphism of one of their detox enzymes. 2D6-3A4, if one of those enzymes, for example, is jammed up, say, with an antihistamine, and they take a cardiac drug, their blood level of the cardiac drug may go through the ceiling and cause heart block or death. The Japanese, when we made these discoveries, was research scientists out of Ohio 30 years ago, put it in their national health card within 5 years. So in Japan, if you go there and you're a Japanese citizen, your health card shows your gene polymorphisms so that they can monitor your blood level of your drug in hospital. They can also be aware that certain gene SNPs are present that are going to cause you trouble. Those gene SNP abnormalities will also tell us that certain nutrients can jump over the gene SNP and provide you the activated nutrients, which is why all of our nutrients are activated at Nutrimedical. Now, I could take someone who's a criminal, do, say, hair or blood analysis of their heavy metals, look at organic acids, look at imaging studies of their brain, including quantitative electroencephalograms, SPECT blood flow scans, PET scans, and I can tell you, give you what I call a neurobiological diagnosis of why they have, like the movie Young Frankenstein. It was one of my comic heroes who just recently died, Willy Wonka. That Young Frankenstein was one of my favorite movies, and one of the favorite lines was the idea you put an abnormal brain and a something like 7 foot something or other monster. Well, abnormal brains are happening more and more often, and most people think there's a lot of debate over this. There really isn't, because I can take an individual case and analyze them and tell you if their brain is abnormal. So when you get a child with ADD or ADHD, Asperger's syndrome, or any other neurobiological abnormality, there's a metabolic and a neurophysiological substrate that I can actually identify with specific imaging studies, tests, gene analysis, and Prometheus to tell you exactly, precisely what's happening and which part of the brain is actually abnormal. So when people say that there's a lot of discussion or different opinions, there is if you don't know what you're doing, but there isn't if you do, like I, who do know what I'm doing. Now, I worked for many years with neurobiologists and trained in Lexicor and quantitative electroencephalography in Boulder. And what people need to understand is if we don't take this approach to medicine and to criminal activity the same way as legalization of drugs. And one of the things that I've seen is in Western Canada, they took the approach of laissez-faire, let everybody use whatever drugs they want, and we will go medicalize it. Now, I think that's kind of crazy. I think that what we should do is, number one, decriminalize drug use, but we have to medicalize it to the point where we know what people's genetic predispositions are and make certain they don't get exposed to something that their gene polymorphisms are going to make them psychotic or lose their mind or get neurodegeneration. And this is something that concerns me because they want to make a, quote, safe zone for use of heroin, which is a deadly narcotic. They also, we have a lot of people that are being treated for pain by using opioid narcotics. And in actual fact, the pain gate is, the first pain gate is in your skin. I discovered it, posted it in my patents in 1986 at the U.S. Patent Office. It's called the Langerhans gate. Now, Dr. Langerhans, who discovered the Langerhans complex in the pancreas as well, a pathologist over around 100 years ago, discovered this complex in the skin. And I found ways of blocking the different receptors using homeopathic pharmaceuticals and herbals, and I was able to actually turn off pain within seconds by just injecting at these neurodermal complexes called Langerhans complexes. We can also use microcurrent. Lumen photon is one of my favorites because you don't have to kind of fiddle around and try to find it. and have a special therapy. Microcurrent devices here in America, you have to be a licensed physician to do them, or a technician. And the public can't just get a microcurrent device unless they've gone through special training like Dr. Conrad's eye protocol, and they have a small portable microcurrent device for trying to help people with eye disorders. Well, what people should start to understand is that where you want to start pain is down where it starts. At the Langerhans complex in the skin, at the dorsal root ganglia and the spinal cord, and the ascending spinal thalamic tracts. Those are the first three pain gates. Now, you do not want to be slapping people on narcotics, and giving people heroin or access to it is not a solution to create a, quote, safe zone. The whole approach in healthcare and medicine, if you want to give healthcare to all American citizens and make it right, you need to go beyond the social republics of France and Canada and Australia. You need to make it a truly right, just like in ancient Israel, where, number one, the tithe went to the Cohens, which are the health providers, and they were never paid fee-for-service. There never was malpractice. There was levels of competency by the people within the organization cross-checking to make sure people were adequate and competent in whatever they had to do. They were the surgeons. They were the physicians. They were the public health officers. They're the ones that could condemn a house to be burnt to the ground because they had mold in it, which could kill you. And our current system is evil. The system we have in healthcare in America, most Americans, it's kind of strange, they get kind of antsy over the idea that you even think about nationalized healthcare. I don't want nationalized healthcare where it's top down. I want an individual relationship with a physician where nobody beyond you and your physician knows why you're seeing the doctor. There's no records going to Health and Human Services or any other organization. That the doctor's being constantly trained and retrained to make sure they maintain competency, whether they're doing surgery, like shoulder surgery or whatever. And you can train laterally. You start off as an EMT, or you've been a medic in the military, and you decide you want to train up to become a surgeon. It's totally up to you to take the online courses and then go to the special surgery centers to prove your competency, just like we do for advanced trauma, advanced cardiac life support. So the only reason why we don't have, quote, truly nationalized healthcare that's right is because we haven't controlled costs, just like education. Most education in this day and age should be online. We should have a virtual university. We also should have centers of excellence where we don't have like this stupid curricula that it makes children, basically not get properly educated so they can't compete with other children from other countries like China, Australia, Europe, etc. Common Core, which Trump wants to fix. So, each of these things doesn't require more money. It requires a different attitude. Just like we have a overburden of people with diabetes, all the current treatments of diabetes don't address the fact that we have elevated blood levels of insulin, elevated blood levels of stress hormones like cortisol, elevated levels of glucagon that convert protein into sugar, and a decreased level of free radical protectants, because the loss of free radicals, superoxide dismutase 1 and 2 in the body, induces leukotriene B4, which causes the insulin receptor to disappear and leptin resistance to occur. So your appetite isn't controlled. Your insulin doesn't make the GLUT4 transporter transport sugar. So the reason why we're not solving the problems is we don't identify the issues of the problem. That's why I challenge people to say, if you have a question in any area, in any sphere of influence, geopolitical, financial, or otherwise, call into the show. I'll give you either an answer or a framework to find the answer immediately. And the reason is you ask the right questions. And I'll show you how to start asking the right questions. For example, I like Trump's approach and the advisors around him in terms of the military. We need to look at what our strategies are with what kinds of future conflicts we want, that we know we're likely to be dealing with. We need to have a different attitude of using metadata to track, for example, Islamic terrorism. We need better ways of monitoring all these mosques to apprehend imams that are preaching to our young American citizens, or maybe second or third generation or first generation, how to become extreme Islam. So each of these issues can be dealt with if we approach them logically and ask the right questions. And welcome back to the Nutrimedical Report, and we continue to talk about specific issues. I'd like to cover some of the stories that I've seen lately. I think are appropriate for people to understand. Trump is definitely up in the polls, and people say, well, why is that? Well, number one, he's not making statements I call political potty mouth. He's sticking to substantive issues that actually were going to help people, like the minorities, blacks, Hispanics in the inner cities. He's got a program now for women, for daycare. He's talking about the military, so he has military support. He is going to close the borders as per our existing laws. He doesn't have to create laws. He just has to enforce the ones that were there. We have a out-of-control deconstructor of America in the White House, who, in my opinion, he is not an American. That all the evidence that I've seen indicates he's a Kenyan, who pretending to be born in Hawaii. And the birth registry is being brought up to try to silence not just Donald Trump, but to silence the so-called conspiracy theory crowd, which mean we have evidence of the complicity of government in doing 9/11 in Oklahoma City, and the complicity of the government in illegal drug trade up to $2 trillion that are not having oversight by the Congress and Senate for deep underground military bases and off-world space projects and genetic engineering and other projects that are totally unethical and are not for the good of American citizens. At the same time, they're allowing jobs to be exported all over the world. And then when we look at the national and the other polls, although they say the polls are ahead for Donald, but you look at this electoral college, we also need, after this election, to revise how we do things. We need to be voting directly for our president, not through an electoral college where we vote for the electoral college and they vote. Because if you look at the electoral college votes, even though Donald is ahead 6 points nationally, Hillary still has more electoral college because of the natural distribution pattern that gives them more electoral college votes for the Democrats. It's irrational, and that needs to be fixed so that when we, the public, vote, we vote directly for our president. And of course, Colin Powell has made some comments about Hillary's health. I'm sure that within the Democrats now, the big force is they want to bring out a candidate they think they can win. I think Bernie Sanders, although we've got a lot of young people that are naive, that don't know how they're going to raise the money. If you don't control the cost, which nobody's talking about how to control the cost of education or health care, how are you going to give free health care or education? I could provide a solution, but none of the Democrats have ever made statements like I have to specifically completely re-engineer health care, like getting rid of malpractice, getting rid of state licensure, having national licensing boards, allowing lateral training. No one's talked about this except me. Now, that's a big problem, because if you don't talk solutions and you just talk about how you want to do something and you can't afford it and you got a $19 trillion debt, what are you going to do next? So, and then, by the way, when we look at these polls, Trump is a solutions man. That's why he makes deals. That's why he's able to work things through. And the absence, of course, of Hillary obviously shows that the idea that maybe it was a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. This is an actual fact. Now, I know they've even put the theory out there that they're going to bring in Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama has no personality to speak of. She doesn't have any political knowledge. She doesn't have any background. Again, of course, we could say that about Obama. He basically is an affirmative action president. Some of the, of course, things that we've seen, too, are very clear evidence that they brought in a body double for Hillary. And if you have real pneumonia, like the kind she has, you should be off work for about 2 weeks. Not 2 or 3 days. So, the Democrats and the globalists behind them are desperate now because they know they are losing the election. And when it comes to the debates, you can know a media person like Donald Trump will completely destroy Hillary Clinton's arguments. And if he doesn't counterpunch, and when she tries to throw insulting things at him, whether about the birther issue or about his hair or anything else, or call him a misogynist or woman hater or a racist, because David Duke has said that he supports him. Who cares who supports him? They're all Americans. And this issue that Hillary Clinton raised of being deplorables, that means 25% of the American population to her attacking the voters is part of the reason why she's lost so much in the polls. So when we come back, we may be starting early with Ann Morrison because we have lots to cover. We'll be back in a moment, and your questions are welcome. Again, I think I gave the numbers out the other day. We will be able to give you some answers to any problems you have. Just call in. With Ann, my son Matthew had an emergency that came up, so he's not able today, but he'll be back next Friday with some amazing topics. And so we were talking about the monoamine oxidase 2 replicate gene that actually is tied directly to violent behavior. And we've got a lot of topics to cover. What do you want to cover first?
Well, I think it's important to start with radiation.
Good. Okay. Well, by the way, after the show, we do either today or tomorrow. We'll do updates. I'm hoping if it's not today, because I'm still getting some minor tweaks of my video capture software fixed up. They must have sent me an update that made it start to speed up or do weird things in the last week or so. So when computer companies do that, they don't necessarily know what they're doing to particular people's systems when they give you updates, do they?
No, that's right. I just got an update, and I'm still trying to figure out why things don't work.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes I call they undate things rather than update them. They misdate them. Okay, let's talk about radiation. You have event 52229, Palo Verde hot standby.
Okay, now we talked about Palo Verde last week, and it was on hot standby at this time. Well, this came out. You have to understand that they don't get posted. These notices don't get posted to the NRC collection center up to a week after they get posted to the NRC.
Right.
So this one occurred just the day after the one that I talked about last week.
Right.
And what happened was that when they went into hot standby, they looked at some of their systems, and they discovered that the seismic monitor system computer was not working. So they just left it. They just were in hot standby, and that computer just wasn't working. So anyway, I'm just going to remind people, Palo Verde is in Arizona. There's about 2 million people living within a 50-mile radius, and this one was licensed in 1985. And when they were in hot standby, I guess they looked at some of the other the systems, and they found out that the seismic monitoring system computer wasn't working. Now, it's a pressurized water reactor by Combustion Engineering, and this one was written on 9/9, and it's now 9/16, so it was 7 days ago.
Right.
And they're going to correct the condition, and they say it's now corrected.
Is it near any major fault zones? Like the movie San Andreas, in fact, the big earthquake at San Andreas started actually, according to the movie, in Arizona, in areas that weren't understood to have fault zones. Are there any activities occurring that could potentially have been picked up in Arizona?
Well, it's part of... Well, it's not part of the San Andreas fault system, but it's close enough to Southern California and to the San Andreas fault that runs up. Remember, it runs up through Baja California.
Yeah, you're referring to the San Jacinto. The San Andreas is right to the terminus, 75 miles from San Jacinto, which is 95 miles from here. And
right, but
it runs down through the Baja,
through the Sea of Cortez.
Right.
But over on the east side of California, there's a lot of activity at Long Valley, and I don't know how it relates to the San Andreas fault, but there is a fault system there, Long Valley. It's like Yellowstone.
Right.
It's a big, it's a big area. And it had a lot of volcanic action at one time, and there's still a lot of magma there. So it's like a super volcano that is dormant, but it's still active, so to speak. And so, it's fairly close to there, and I suppose that, they want to know if there were an earthquake there. We don't see many earthquakes there.
Right.
Mostly, but we do see them in Long Valley, and that's not that far away.
Right. Another one you're mentioning here is the Davis-Besse Ohio Hot Standby Unit trip due to main generator lockout. What happened?
Well, that was an automatic trip. That means that the nuclear power plant itself, the software in the nuclear power plant, shut the power plant down. And that's in northern Ohio on the shore of Lake Erie or Huron, and it's got about 2 million people within a 50-mile radius. It was licensed in 1977, so you add 20 years to that, and that's 1997. And we're at 2017, so we're 20 years past that. And so it's obviously been relicensed by the NRC, and it's probably using that high buildup, burn-up fuel.
So the high buildup fuel, and it's post-geriatric, which is the way we calculate it out, if it's beyond a relicensing period.
Yeah, now it's a pressurized water reactor that was built by Babcock and Wilcox, and it's in hot standby, or it was. This happened on the 10th of September, so it happened in this current week. I doubt that it's still on hot standby. But what happened was that an automatic reactor trip occurred due to a main generator lockout, and all the control rods. What happens when you have a SCRAM? SCRAM stands for Safety Axemen Cut Rope. And there's always any nuclear power station will have a big red button, and it's got SCRAM written on it. But this wasn't manual, so this was an automatic SCRAM. And it was apparently the steam feed water rupture control system. So we had feed water, and it was feeding steam into the generator. So this is after, well, it was, what happens is that the nuclear reactor within the reactor vessel turns the water to steam, and then they force it out into the generator where it turns into electricity. And so what happened, it was the cause of the high steam generator level is being investigated at this time. It is in hot standby and stable at approximately 550 degrees Fahrenheit and 2,155 something as pressure. And steam is, now this is the important part. Well, there's two important parts. One is that it's in hot standby. The second is that the steam is being discharged through the atmospheric vent valves for decay heat removal. Well, you have to understand this steam was generated from the water that is in the containment vessel with the fuel rods when
right,
they
so
are...
It's radioactive steam is what you're saying.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And they say there's no primary or secondary leakage, but I bet you if you had a Geiger counter or a gamma counter...
Yeah, like our Inspector Plus that picks up gamma, alpha, and beta. Gamma, most dangerous, alpha being those alpha particles, and beta being high-speed electrons.
Right, and the alpha and the beta, the main danger with those is if you swallow them or if you breathe them in.
Right.
But they probably would not go through your skin, although they might, the beta might cause skin cancer. But the gamma radiation goes right through you, and it's known to cause DNA damage and birth defects and cancers and all sorts of organ damage.
Right.
So, if any of that is gamma related. Now, I looked at the RADCON map, and there's nothing, but this RADCON map is as of yesterday.
Right.
And I can't go back and get the one that was around the 10th. And I don't usually pick them up every day.
Well, the RADCON map is, who runs the radiation detectors? Which agency?
These are both private and EPA devices.
So they would include the ones like the Radiation Network as well, right? So in other words, one up in Idaho that they shut down after Fukushima 5.5 years ago was one of them up in Idaho when it went off scale. And they haven't reactivated. So some of these are private, but they're all run by the government, though, right? Basically,
no,
or by agencies. Or by agencies related to the nuclear reactors. They're licensed by each state.
No.
Okay.
Some of them are run by the EPA, And some of them are run by educational facilities, and some of them are
really
run by private individuals.
But they all converge their data onto this one map, is what you're saying?
Yes. And in order to be part of this network, you have to be certified.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because it means they have a hodgepodge of radiation spots that aren't necessarily determined by government. It can be educational or private companies.
Right, and they even rate the devices or the data that they get from the devices as either good or bad or...
Yeah, so they rate whether or not that Radcon site is good. Now, I notice on it they have little green discs. They have ones that are yellow and black, and they have ones that are kind of red and yellow. What do the different disc colors mean when you look at the Radcon map?
Well, you can go up to netc.com, and that will tell you what those mean. But you'll see that there are none here that are of concern when you go up there and look at that legend, and also that there's none that there's an alert for. So that's good. It's
good to know that this week there's nothing that's kind of going crazy.
Nothing is going crazy, but they all have, they are measuring the gamma radiation across the country and even up into Alaska and down into the Caribbean. I didn't show the whole map. I just showed the map that was available to me.
Right, and now this is all just U.S. territory, including U.S. areas like Alaska. Maybe does it include any other countries or any other areas?
No.
Okay.
This is all U.S., but we do have, like, Puerto Rico. I think we have a detector down in the Caribbean at Puerto Rico, and some of the other U.S. territories down in the Caribbean Sea.
Right.
So this is so there is activity. This is called the Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center, and like I said, it keeps track of what the EPA measures and also what universities are measuring, what companies are measuring, and what individuals are measuring. And, if you belong to it, then you can get your meter, your detector certified. And but they do qualify them depending on how good they think the information is.
Right. Like I'm going to hook up my radiation detector, which is Inspector Plus, and you can get it through LessEMF and put it up on the website. I'm going to put mine up, and I'm going to encourage other people. Now, what I'd like to get I'm going to work on the idea of getting some software so we can post this all up from individuals that listen to the program, want to get the Inspector Plus and the web connection software and hardware so they can actually post what radiation level is at their town or city across America.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you can tap into the Nuclear Emergency Tracking Center, netc.com, then you will actually see it posted on their website, on the map, on the U.S.
Yeah, because the Inspector Plus is a very good detector for all types of radiation, gamma, beta, and alpha. It picks up all three.
Yeah, Radcon is only interested in gamma, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, and what's the next major issue?
Well, we're still having climate issues, and so let's go to the Arctic Ozone Watch.
Right, that was the one on 12th of September. What's happening there?
Well, remember last time we had an ozone hole that was over the magnetic North Pole?
Right.
Well, that has moved, and it is now over the spin axis. So it's the geographic North Pole, and there's also some lack of ozone that is it's really hard to over Alaska.
Right.
You have to look at this map, and then you have to, or the Pacific Northwest. The continents are there, but they're just a lighter color, and so
it's hard to say it, but you have to kind of look at the so the Pacific Northwest going right up through British Columbia and to coastal areas of western Alaska are under this ozone hole. Yes.
It's kind of looking at that picture where in one case you see the old tag, and in the other, then you kind of cross your eyes or something, and then you can see a beautiful young lady I don't know if you've ever seen that picture.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So you can see Hudson Bay on the bottom of this picture of this world map, and you see a big oval-shaped area over the spin axis, and you see a big oval over the northwestern United States, British Columbia, and Alaska, western Alaska.
Yeah, and underneath it you will find a legend, and you'll see that the blues are towards the zero end of the scale.
Now, what are the effects of an ozone hole? It increases ground level ozone because you get ozone generate. You have ultraviolet light damage to plants.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have anything to do with ground level ozone, but it does have a lot to do with ultraviolet light from the sun. In the stratosphere, at that level, the oxygen that we know of as O2, that is two oxygen atoms together to make a molecule,
right,
is because of the pressure and the temperature, they're separated and they're oxygen ions.
Right.
So you just have an ionized oxygen atom, and you have a lot of them. And what happens is that the energy of the ultraviolet light from the sun is at the right energy level to meld 3 oxygen ions into ozone.
Right.
So that's a wonderful thing because it keeps the ultraviolet light from hitting the surface of the Earth. That's what has protected us all these years. I don't know if you know this, but skin cancer was rare. I remember as a child.
It was rare back then. It's not rare anymore.
Not rare anymore.
It also changes, quote, pollutants that are being spewed up by plants because ultraviolet light, when it hits those chemicals and the pollutants, it alters them, including trimethyltic anhydride from diesel fuel. Back in a moment with Ann Morrison. Stay tuned. Your calls are welcome. We'll be back in a moment with more, and then we're going to go to another hour in a few minutes. Total ozone and Dobson units, if you look at that chart at the bottom, all the way from really bad, which is kind of black and purple, which we see in one area that you pointed out on the break, and then sort of the southern aspect of it looks to me like northern British Columbia and southern Alaska, that area.
Yeah. That's what it looks like to me, too. Now, what can cause an ozone hole? Okay, well, what creates ozone? Oxygen ions. We know that the oxygen level is dropping as a percentage of the atmosphere.
Talking about the total oxygen. That's kind of concerning because if you need 3 things to do that, go ahead, to make ozone.
Right. And we have a science center here in St. Louis on Interstate 64, Highway 40. Actually, I think it's Interstate 40. I don't know. Maybe they're both interstates. It's very confusing to me.
Right.
They call it 6440. But in any case, there's a science center there, and they actually measure the composition of the atmosphere. And it has dropped from 21% over the last 50 years to 19%.
Ooh,
And
that's serious.
Well, yeah, and you have told me that you have articles or you have news that the oxygen level in the atmosphere has dropped even further in cities like Brasilia or Rio de Janeiro.
Exactly, large megacities like Mexico City, Sao Paulo, Brazil, whatever. And what's happening is these large cities, through industry or people, are consuming more oxygen. So in some of these cities, between automobiles and people and industry, the oxygen is as low as, say, 14%. So
right, and paleontologists can look back through the scientific record, through the rock record,
right,
and they can tell what the oxygen level was at different times,
right,
as the Earth has existed. And what they discovered is that when the dinosaurs were roaming around, the oxygen level was very low, but the carbon dioxide level was very high. And so the plants, there were a lot of plants, so they could grow big mammals, and they could grow...
Exactly. Yeah, you need 3 things to make ozone. The Schumann resonance of the Earth, which is weakening, ultraviolet light from the sun, which we have plenty of, and oxygen, which is dropping, which is not good. When we come back in just a moment, we'll be in our regular hour with a lot more information to cover. Stay tuned, and if you have questions, do call into the studio. If you want to know the latest number, I know that we gave it before. We'll give it at the top of the hour in a minute. To call in, I know the old number was 800-313-9443, but I don't think it's working yet. We'll be back in a moment with Ann Morrison, our scientist, and twiland.info. We do a follow-up either today or tomorrow in our videos. We'll post it on YouTube and Vimeo. Back in a moment.